Jan Southworth retired from the East Bay Regional Park District after 29 years of service as a naturalist. Of her many achievements, one that she is most proud of is the creation of the butterfly garden at Coyote Hills Regional Park. In her own words, she describes the garden, its creation, plantings, and educational successes.
I've been with East Bay Regional Parks 29 years, and I've been a naturalist that entire time. I started my career here at Coyote Hills in 1976. I was here for 13 years, met and married my husband, who was a fellow naturalist here, and I was transferred to Ardenwood Historic Farm, which is 3 miles away from here. I was there for 7 years, and during the course of my tenure at Ardenwood Historic Farm, I became aware that in the eucalyptus forest surrounding Ardenwood, there was an overwintering site for monarch butterflies. The fact that there were so many in one place that I began to do a lot of reading and research and visited other overwintering sites which were much larger, like Natural Bridges down in the Santa Cruz area, the Pacific Grove site. There are many sites down in the San Luis Obispo area. So I did some studying on the overwintering behavior, and I realized that we had at Ardenwood an actual overwintering site, not simply a bivouac or a stopover site where butterflies pause as they're moving south, but our butterflies were with us throughout the winter. So I wanted to begin an educational program there to bring the public in to Ardenwood and bring school children in. And in the course of my research to put that program together, I came across a rather astounding statistic that indicated that 50 years ago, in the Los Angeles Basin or in the San Francisco Bay region, the typical person taking a walk in the springtime might have encountered 50 to 100 different species of butterflies. But that today, 5-6 decades later, the population, the diversity among butterflies has dropped by 80 to 85%. So for a child growing up in the 1940s or 50s, they would have seen butterflies around them continuously in the springtime, lots of different varieties. But when I asked my students what kinds of common butterflies they encountered, they typically said 3. The big yellow one, the big orange one, and the little white one, which of course would be one of the swallowtails, the monarch, and the cabbage white butterfly, which is very common. So I realized that we were beginning to experience a loss of the common experience of having those butterflies that we refer to as flying jewels, or we were experiencing something that was reducing the quality of our own lives. It wasn't simply that the butterfly population was diminishing, our human experience was being diminished by the absence of butterflies in our common everyday life in the springtime and summer. So that prompted me to do some research and to begin some programming related to butterfly gardening so that we could begin in the urban landscape of the San Francisco Bay Area to do what biologists are asking us to do, which is to create habitat corridors or highways of habitat throughout our metropolitan landscape. And that's something that's really remarkably easy to do. Some of the foundation shrubs, like native ceanothus and other species, were planted already. Some of them my husband and I planted 2 decades ago, but there was a turf grass area and children's play equipment and a variety of other things. So we did have to really start from scratch with the hardscape and then select the pathway areas and the routes and then begin to put in the correct plant choices. I picked out some manuals on feng shui and the proper energy flow that is appropriate for a garden, and the small nooks that you like to create in a garden that allow people to engage in quiet contemplation and observation. And then I studied the plant growth requirements and decided where the taller plants should go versus the shorter varieties so that we could get maximum view shed from various points in the garden. Critical in a butterfly garden is the right plant choices and providing a wind-protected spot, because butterflies are very, very lightweight, of course. A monarch butterfly weighs less than a 50th of an ounce, and that's one of our larger species of butterflies. So if you have a very windy spot, the butterflies are going to be blown right past. And if you have butterfly-friendly plants, that's great. That the plant choices are critical as well. But if it's so windy in your garden that the butterflies must waste a lot of energy trying to hang on to the plants or trying to land on them, then that reduces your success in butterfly gardening. So wind protection is critical. 6 hours of sunlight a day is pretty critical, because butterflies are insects, so they're cold-blooded and they don't want to spend a lot of time in the shade. So you need good sunlight to grow the appropriate plants and to provide the warmth for the butterflies. Well, we have a combination of California natives, and we do promote the selection of California natives for butterflies. But we also have people that come to our programs that really want a combination of plants. So we've opted for a combination garden that supplies some horticultural varieties of plants and some California natives. So we have lemon marigold, which is a wonderful bushy plant that provides lots of nectar in the fall. We also have a 12-foot tall daisy tree called Montanoa grandiflora, which provides tremendous nectar in the winter months. In mid-November through December, this plant is blooming with clusters of white and yellow daisies that are loaded with nectar. And often on a warm winter day, when you wander out to the garden and that plant's in full bloom, you'll find 2, 3, 4 dozen monarchs that are leaving the overwintering site 3 miles away and coming over here for some quick energy in the form of flower nectar. That's Salvia mexicana. Limelight is the variety, and its characteristic is these green calyxes that hold the brilliant purple flower. And this is one of the Hummer favorites. This is a buddleia I should try to get you a cutting of. It's called Strawberry Lemonade. It doesn't get very tall, and it has a nice pink lilac-like bloom on it, and it's a good attractant. This one right here is Asclepias linearia. It's called pine leaf milkweed. It's from Arizona. It's coming into bloom.
Really?
Yeah, and we've had several caterpillars. You wouldn't think that it could sustain a very large population of caterpillars, but they seem to eat slowly on that plant, and sometimes we find 4 or 5 of them on there, and the plant seems to survive fine, so it must be well adapted to living with the caterpillars. So the yarrow, we had a good stand of yarrow over in here. That's one of our California natives that did really well. Has a nice landing platform. Unfortunately, it's not blooming right now, but all of the gray-green foliage in here is good for the monarchs. That's cestrum. This one gets 8-10 feet tall, and it's primarily a nectar producer for hummingbirds because of the tubular shape of the flowers. Here's that Asclepias fruticosa that volunteered here. If you sit down on the bench here, look what we've got here.
Oh,
and here, and here.
Here, yeah.
And then there are all kinds of first, second, third instars that I want to ask the kids to find.
Oh,
and look what's here. This one. See that?
Whoa, you've got one, you've got one.
A chrysalis right on the leaf. The madrone tree right there, that's great.
Beautiful.
Butterflies love that.
Yes.
Hummingbirds love it. And this is one of the native mallows, Lavaterra oscurgentifolia. And this is the host plant for the gray hair streak, and we did find some gray hair streak larvae on here.
They must be awfully small.
They're very tiny, and they're gray-green and kind of velvety. The sign that you've got them is when you see a bud like this that's gone blonde or yellowish in color, and there's a little hole drilled right through it. That's what the larvae do when they hatch. I guess the eggs are laid right on a bud cluster, and then the larvae chew their way in. And then this is more of that Salvia leucantha. That's a great nectar plant for the swallowtails. And this is fennel. This is a non-native species, but it's the host plant for the Anise swallowtail. And these are the types of foliage that you want to examine very carefully to see if you have any of the tiny little larvae. This is another species of Buddleia davidii, or davidii. This one is known as honeycomb Buddleia, and it for some reason has a very powerful nectar that seems to be preferred even among other Buddleias by monarch butterflies. And since it's a late bloomer and blooms well into the fall, it provides nectar during the colder seasons. So this is one of our California native shrubs, the holly leaf cherry, and they're often nibbled on by a number of different insects, but the host plant for the pale swallowtail. Then we have the wild blackberry here that's been good for the birds and the butterflies. The white blossoms are used for nectar. We just began a pilot program about a year ago to bring second and third grade students whose curriculum requires that they study insects in science. And the garden serves as a beautiful but gentle introduction to the study of insect life, whereas many students will be frightened or intimidated by spiders and scorpions and things that are not as friendly as butterflies. Butterflies provide an instant attraction, so kids are instantly mesmerized, fascinated by the butterfly life in the garden. And so we bring them through in small groups, each group assigned to a volunteer or docent, and almost immediately they begin to see both hummingbirds and butterflies using the garden. But they can, when they begin to tune in and focus on some of the plant life, they can study which plants the butterflies are using, and they can oftentimes follow the entire life cycle of a butterfly like the monarch, from finding the eggs on the host plant all the way through to watching a butterfly emerge from the chrysalis and fly off to nectar on a flower. We often do some tagging here in the garden with captive butterflies when butterflies emerge from their chrysalids, when we've been raising them in teacher workshops with the students. Teachers recently left our workshop with a series of tags, and I've talked to them recently, and they're tagging their butterflies at the various elementary schools as the children prepare to release the butterflies. We've counted at least 14 or 15 species recently in the garden. So we commonly see the Lorquin's admiral, which uses as its host plant willow trees, and although we hadn't seen them commonly in the park before, they must have been here to some extent because many of their host plants are down surrounding our marshland. But now they're also coming up and using the nectar that's provided for them in the garden here. Red admirals we find here, of course the cabbage white, several varieties of swallowtail, the western tiger swallowtail, the pipevine swallowtail, the Anna swallowtail. Skippers, lots of skippers. The gray hair-streaked butterfly is here. The mournful dusky wing. So it's been fun for us as well to begin to key out all of the species that visit the garden, and that's one of the recommendations that we make to people when they're just beginning, is to choose one particular species of plant, like a butterfly bush, the Buddleia plant, which produces large lilac-like blossoms that are longer blooming than a lilac, and that provides such a magnet for butterfly species of all kinds that it works out well to begin with a foundation plant like a Buddleia, and then to sit in a quiet spot near your Buddleia plant with your field guide ready to identify the species that visit your habitat. And that's what we've done out here. We've identified the species that visit us using the nectar resource that we provide, and then we begin to increase our butterfly-friendly plant offerings by planting the host plants that the butterflies will lay their eggs on and the young will survive on. We originally designed it for children and to provide children an interaction place where they could get up close and personal with a species of wildlife like a caterpillar or a butterfly, but we find that adults get just as excited as the students, sometimes even more excited. So we've had adults leave here and go right over to one of our local nurseries and demand that they carry milkweed or that they carry some of the other host plants for our common California species. We can also then study food chain and food web cycles with our students. We have a lot of scrub jays that frequent the garden, and periodically a scrub jay gobbles up a butterfly or even a monarch butterfly. But of course the monarch has that important defense. It's toxic as a result of having milkweed as its host plant. So you can see that butterflies have their defense mechanisms. Sometimes it's their flight patterns, sometimes it's the fact that they have an internalized toxin, so that one butterfly may lose its life to a jay or a chickadee or another insectivorous bird, but the bird quickly learns its lesson and then avoids those butterflies. So those are some interesting behavioral strategies or biological strategies for defense that the butterflies have, and you can witness those in the garden. So it's another good science lesson. Keeping a pesticide-free garden is critically important, because one of the reasons for that plummet in the diversity of butterflies has been the excessive use of pesticide. Habitat reduction, of course, is the other critical reason butterfly populations are so down. There are a lot of good books now that are out that will give you some good hard facts about butterfly gardens, the criteria for an optimal butterfly garden. The Xerxes Society puts out a nice manual on butterfly gardening. So you can go to your local library, you can go to the internet, you can come out to Coyote Hills, and we have several brochures available that are giveaways for people who want to establish a butterfly garden. We have a brochure on the life cycle of the monarch. Because the monarch is one of our most glamorous insects, I think that has a lot of appeal for people, and so studying the life cycle and starting with a couple of milkweed plants often is what gets people really excited, and then they want to branch out from there. They want to attract the swallowtail and the gray hair streak, and most people have fiery skippers in their yard because the host plant is grass, Bermuda grass, and so when they begin seeing all those little orange butterflies, that also can spur them on to coming out to see us and learning more about butterflies. When you think about the daunting, bewildering conservation problems and issues that face all of us today, and how many of us feel like it's impossible to really make a difference as an individual. We can write a check to a conservation organization, but we can't save the whales by inviting them into our backyard. So with butterflies, we can get directly involved. We can do more than simply writing a check or saving some money to donate to the right organization. We can instead, in addition to doing those things, we can make the right choices related to common plants, native plants, and some horticultural varieties that are magnets for butterflies. And in that way, we can bring butterflies into our own backyard and begin to increase their numbers and their diversity.
The Butterfly Garden at Coyote Hills is a living legacy of the work of retiring naturalist Jan Southworth. Through the fulfillment of her goal to increase the numbers and diversity of butterfly species in local parks, schools, and residential gardens, children and adults in increasing numbers are experiencing a richer, more intimate connection with the natural world around them. Her garden will continue to be part of the living laboratory teacher training programs offered at the park, and is providing one of the proposed 10,000 way stations for the North American monarch butterflies during their migration to and from their overwintering sites. One person, through her deep concern and commitment, has made a difference for California wildlife species. You can too. Take a butterfly to lunch by planting the right flowers. Nourish baby butterflies by growing caterpillar food plants. These important acts of environmental stewardship will reward you with a lively garden and a life-enhancing connection to nature.